So you join me as we are about to jump back in time to January 2006 and the first ever episode of Life on Mars, screened on BBC One, the whole series averaging a viewership of around about 6.8 million. And we're in very familiar territory for the police drama, with a start with a car chase speeding towards the home of a suspect. Here's our protagonist Sam Tyler taking the lead, representation of gender, the one to knock on the door and give chase to Colin Rames, our suspect. Another familiar setting, the station. From there, we're going to head straight into the interview room. Steve Neal, of course, has argued that genres are dominated by repetition, and this is no different here. Everything to us is familiar tropes of the police crime drama. What this episode is doing, of course, is setting up a clear binary between 2006 and the 1973 area that Sam is about to be thrown into. And so those methods of policing, very significant. We're going to see those juxtaposed. Here again, another key difference between the present of 2006 and the past of 73. Sam Tyler driving and crying, and if you were wearing a baggy suit like that, you'd probably want to weep too. But he was a new man in touch with his emotions and his feelings, and therefore being, set up for a clear juxtaposition, a clear binary against the character of Gene Hunt, who will be introduced in very larger than life terms very, very shortly. Whoops, should have seen that one coming, Sam. So, key pivotal disequilibrium there as he is shunted back into the past. And one of the real pleasures that this episode and this series offers the audience is the nostalgia, the familiarity of the props, the mise en scène, the cars, the fashions of the 1970s. So for an older audience, there's a real nostalgic value, real pang and pleasure to be had from seeing just the way they've decorated the set and recreated 1973. So that familiar setting of the police station, but now given a twist. Here we are in this smoke-filled room of the 1970s, and everything is familiar and yet oh so different. And here comes the man himself, larger than life, totally hyper-real, Gene Hunt. So this is a version of the 1970s that is very much mediated through the crime dramas such as The Professionals and The Sweeney, where sexist, patriarchal values held sway. Confessions would be beaten out of suspects, and sexism in the workplace was rife. And this is played kind of for comic effect throughout the episode, but also it is inviting us to question these values and set them alongside the values of 2006. And at times we're positioned to kind of uphold the modern day values, at times a position to question them. This particular scene, a great scene to show that contrast in values, the way in which Chris Skelton, who is presented quite sympathetically, the way in which he abuses evidence and a little bit of, comic sexism and, dare I say it, banter in the police station there. Another familiar setting for this genre. We're down at the morgue, and again, we miss a little bit there that's played for laugh when Chris is asked to inspect the contents of the body there. But lots of this is played for laughs, of course. Lots of misunderstandings about mobiles, about Virgin phones, about PC terminals. Here's obviously another key character and pretty much the most interesting representation of femininity in the episode, Annie Cartwright, who we, of course, positioned very sympathetically towards. There is a hint of a love affair being established in this first episode of the series. It was compulsory for everyone to wear brown in the 1970s, and for all houses to be decorated pretty much in standard issue brown as well. Again, another little pleasure, giving us the old-fashioned TV, the news, the BBC News there, Enoch Powell, iconic little moments from the 70s that are dropped in, these little details, intertextual details that recreate this highly mediated, hyper-real version of the 70s. Real possibility of a question on postmodernism here, so you've really got to be prepared for that. And here's another of those signifiers of the 70s, the open university, the beard, the shaky camera work, the terrible suit. back to the station here, and interesting here, we saw Colin Rames interviewed earlier. Now we see Dora Keane interviewed, and clear binary, clear juxtaposition between the ways in which these two interviews go down, and Jean's technique very, very different to Sam Tyler's, of course. Again, some really iffy sexual politics of the period being depicted here. At times, the 70s is played for laughs. At times, much more dark undercurrents are presented to the audience. Again, a little hint here of it's exploring, possibly quite gently in this first episode, but an underlying racism in the period as well, in the way in which Nelson, the barman, kind of presents himself as one thing to the police at large, and then quite privately presents himself as something different to Sam. Chris, who is this kind of comic foil in the episode, dispatched to sort of do the procedural work of leafing through things. And a key moment here when Sam, with his new man values imported from 2006, promotes Annie, sees her value as a police officer with a psychology degree, sees that she has something to offer, and of course, Chris Skelton is about to put this, play this for laughs. Ray makes a joke about, when the striptease begins, she is up against some sort of fierce, entrenched sexism in the police station of the 1970s. But there's a key moment here. We can see the way the camera zooms towards the two protagonists, that they are onto something here, that we've got a breakthrough with the case. But it's scuppered, of course, by Skelton making a sexist remark. So Sam is, of course, key narrative is that we've got, typical of a police crime drama, we have a case to be solved in this episode, but we also have the relationships within the police force and the hierarchy. We also have the bigger overarching narrative connecting the whole series of, will Sam get back to the present day? Is he alive? Is he dead? So there's a whole range of enigmas being posed there. Bit of camera trickery there. It wheeled one way in the northern quarter of Manchester as they filmed this, and cut to a shot of Oxford Road, the old cinema there, and then cut back to the northern quarter. Some interesting stuff going on there if you're from Manchester. Another little breakthrough in the case here, this as now Sam, those little fibres that were planted for us earlier, he knew that they were going to prove pivotal to cracking this case. As with the bridge, we are given work to do as an audience. We're invested in the police drama. Throughout, more larger than life, Gene Hunt played for laughs here, just as when he demanded, it was time for lunch, he's having hoops. Comic contrast here of the two approaches of Sam and Gene, a prototype mobile phone there from Gene, again, all very much being played for laughs. And the two approaches here, though, interesting that they get different results. It's not Sam who gets the information required from Colin Raines' grandma, of course. It is Gene's sort of much more friendly, softly approach. He does so that he can be a versatile police officer. And there is in this moment here that we're about to see, as classic police drama, they slow-mo, leap in unison as the realization, the little epiphany dawns on them. Classic shot where they are joined together, bursting through the doors there, rushing to crack the case, and in the nick of time, they appear to have done it. She might have been a gobby tart, I think is one of the phrases that Gene Hunt used to describe her, but of course his job as deputy to the law is to save and protect her, and he does that. And of course, the next door neighbour is the one, Edward Kramer, I think he's called. Classic little performance here. Should have won a BAFTA, that little kid, for that. Creepiest little ginger kid you're ever likely to see. Here comes Grandma and the realisation as the past folds into the present. Really clever splicing of the dual narratives here. There's a real complexity to the narrative, which again you could compare to the bridge. So we get a certain amount of resolution here. This case has been cracked in the 70s, but the repercussions into the present day, that enigma continues, as does the overarching enigma. Is Sam Tyler going to make his way back to 2006. So we've had resolution in that within the episode case that needed cracking. Now we've got other narrative strands that need to be tied up. The moral question, will Sam do the right thing or the legal thing or the moral thing? And of course, he sides with Gene Hunt, dropping that medical report into the dustbin, although there is a kind of ambiguous union between the two towards the end here. And the episode then takes us into the whole drama around Sam's precarious state of being at this moment in time, cut adrift between past and present. And of course, like those voices he's heard on the telephone, like when the Open University professor was speaking directly to him, he believes he's having a visitation from the past here. But of course, we do find out this is just Annie's ex. She's pains to point out that he is her ex, as it kind of holds, dangles that promise of a romantic liaison between the two characters. A narrative strand that is, again, staple of the genre and keen to, something that is likely to interest and intrigue and retain viewers from one episode of the series to the next. Reach out your hand, I'll be there. That pretty much takes us to the end of this particular episode of Life on Mars. So remember, you'll be comparing that with The Bridge. Think about genre, the way the key part of that hybridity, the way in which the police drama is merged with science fiction, illustrating what Steve Neal said, dominated by repetition but marked by variation and change. Hope that was of some use. See you later.